Hello, thank you for joining me on the Rotten Lead channel, and today I'm going to be doing some world building using the Traveller book. Now, this is the 2008 edition of Traveller, the role-playing game, and it harks back to the original sort of 1977 through 1986 first edition. And if you were around back then or have seen the rules, they were a kind of a pamphlet size book, and they produced various pamphlets that expanded how you create characters and the world in general. And this sort of attempted to bring all that back together, because there had been kind of your usual various spin-offs and different versions of Traveller that came after 1986. And, you know, way back up, speeding forward to 2008, it does feel like really close to me, 2008, even though it's 2020 now. They re-released it as this kind of revised first edition where they bundled in a lot of the extra info that came in those extra pamphlets, although there's no sort of world setting details in here. It's very much rules only. But you know, it's an elegant early system, and it has a nice character creation process. They fleshed out the character creation in here with quite a few different classes, and they also put a world building section in the back. Now, since I've had this copy, I have occasionally tucked in and looked at the world building and thought, you know, maybe I could do something to knock a setting up. And just recently, a 5e game, Dungeons and Dragons, that I've been running for some friends, has come to a sort of natural pause when they've got to about level 13, 14, I think it is now. And I thought I'd go for sci-fi, and I thought, why not use this Traveller since I've got it? And I like the system. Also, I like the fact that it has that kind of old school Renaissance feel to how it works. So my first step is to do some world building and use what's in here to do that. Also, just out of interest, there is a really nice Traveller map project, and I'll put that in the description below. And it's like a online app web page, and you can zoom in and out of the whole Traveller universe. It's kind of official. So it's got all the Spinwood areas that are the classic zones for Traveller, but they've also allow you to edit and change it. But what I'm doing here is just going kind of manual on it, and doing that and recording it while I do it as well. So that's going to be a challenge, but I'm going to show you how I do that, and I will speed it up because I've got to fill a lot of hexes with information. And this is going to be like a part one where I do the basic framework of the subsector that I'm creating, and then we'll go from there. But I'll show you what I was doing initially, because I did a sort of a practice shot at this. So as I said, there are lots of templates online with some nice icons and logos and things to do this. But essentially, these grids are built up like this, and they're 8 across and 10 down in terms of the size. And this is called a subsector within there. And as you work through building this up, as you can see here, I've got some blank ones as well. You first work out whether there's a system in there at all, which potentially is habitable or not, because it could be a system that maybe there's good resources there and people have had to build a base or a star base or some other system. So not necessarily a habitable planet, but that's the next phase you get into after you decide whether there's a system there first. Then you go into the bit where you're actually deciding whether there's an atmosphere, what kind of legal system there is, and everything else about the planet, and the other systems around it. Plus, it's worth mentioning when you're doing world building in Traveller here, it's not like you're doing the surface detail. You're actually going into quite a lot of detail as you follow the procedural process in the back here. But what they kind of steer away from is developing each one of these systems in absolute full detail. So you're not doing Earth, and then another 4 planets in addition to that. You're actually just trying to find the most habitable, interesting place that's become the trade center, become the governing body for that individual sector, system. So if I start you off with what I was doing first, I initially got one of these sheets out. I downloaded it online as a PDF. And in fact, it had a key on it and various symbols that the Traveller system recommends you use. So there's a system hex format, which includes symbols for star bases, symbols for gas giants, and various other things on there. And just as a practice, I sketched it out on a piece of paper like this. I've actually now gone digital. I've not used their the Traveller world map online. I could use something like that as well, but I thought I'd just knock it up myself because I want to do each hex one at a time, work out what's in there, and then sort of move on from there. So just as a general overview, because you can see this full sheet here, I will zoom in a bit more, but this is the basic practice I did as I worked through, and you can see that there's blank spaces where I didn't find any systems, and then there's others where systems have been pulled in there, and I've thrown some names in as well. But as an overview, there's eight across and 10 down of these hexes, which is your what's called a subsector. You need 16 of these subsectors to make a full sector within the Traveller universe. But what they recommend, first of all, is that you focus on a subsector, because that's going to be enough for gameplay in terms of travellers that might be scouts, or your usual merchants, or some other kind of adventuring group that are on a ship moving around that system. Just one system, one of these subsectors is enough to work on. You could build just one system itself, with a planet and a gas giant and various other interesting objectives going on, and that's where all the excitement can happen. But since Traveller's all about being able to move around in spaceships, and many of the classes, when you're making your character, get potentially a share of a ship, or maybe gifted a scout at the end. The idea is that you go straight in, and it is a kind of spacefaring game. It's not just a planetary action or orbital action or whatever it may be. But it's not limited by that. But when they're going into the world building, they do suggest it in here that you try and create that, not complete surface detail, but you try and create just one habitable, or one location that might be a space station or whatever it is in each one of these systems, which will have a gas giant, a sun, and everything else in there. And you then explore between those with jump drives, and that's where the other key thing in terms of scale comes in, because each one of these is 3.26 light years, so that's a parsec in between. So 1 parsec, isn't it, between each place? And again, the Traveller system's locked nice and hard into that, in the sense that jump drives are rated from 1 sort of up to 6 or more potentially, and a jump drive with a rating of 1 can jump 1 stop, so 1 parsec or 1 section on this map, before it needs to refuel. And that refueling could be from scooping from a gas giant, or from a liquid planet or somewhere, or it could be from a base, depending on what's going on there. So that's what they actually have in this world creation section. They have quite a lot of detail on working out whether something has a base or has a gas giant there, and then you actually finally put your routes between to show the jump routes as well. And there's more flavour to add, because you could add to these different sections places that have got warnings, like the sort of imperial structure. The imperial government has said you can't go there for whatever reason, alien incursion, virus, whatever it happens to be. You mark that onto these as well, and there's like a red zone for a no-go. Amber is a kind of a warning, and a red zone would be a no-go, and that can add into the gameplay as well, obviously, because you can add flavour to your setting as you create this subsector. But yeah, that's generally the overview. As I was saying, the principle is in Traveller that you want people jumping around potentially in your adventure. You want them either tagging along on a ship or a vessel of some kind, and to do that you create just that high level detail in each area. The one main planetary location or orbital location in each system, could be an asteroid with a base on, could be anything. You do that. So that's what I'm going to do in here, but I'm going to do this in 2 phases. This first piece of internet magic which I'm creating is going to be just working out whether there's actually anything in these different cells on the hex plan, and filling it out. I'm going to put the names in. I'm going to decide whether there's bases there, what type of bases they are, and then I'll probably do a second episode of this where I go into a little bit more detail while I work out whether what the government is on each location, and then work out more information about atmosphere, legal systems, all of that kind of good crunchy detail that might be part of the campaign as well, but that's going to be too much to fit into one session. As I mentioned, I wasn't going to be diving into the Traveller rules as such. I may do that in another session where I create some characters for this, but obviously I'm creating this for a game with friends, so the idea being generally that they'll be creating the characters that then start to flesh out the game a bit more. But I will show you a little bit about the section in the book which has the world building in there, and I'll just show you that here at a high level. It's right at the back of the book to start, from sort of page 167 in this 2008 edition. They go through an initial intro, as I said, with each one of those hexes being a parsec or 3.26 light years. There's 16 subsectors that you would create one whole sector. And then they run through what you do. So let's check if there's a world in there. And that's a 50-50 chance. So I'll be just doing a 1 to 3, no, 4 to 6, yes type thing on that. Lots of dice rolling to come. Then you check out what kind of starport you have in there. And that starport then dictates the kind of basis. So the starport's the sort of fundamental quality factor, as in when you roll that, you're then determining, is this a really developed place with a massive star base, which is high quality, which would attract all the various different political bodies, scouting groups, everything else to this area, because obviously it must be rich in resources to have such a large base and be significant, or of a military advantage, whatever it happens to be. It's that starport that kind of starts the process of dictating the quality here. But that doesn't necessarily then mean that the planet's amazing, like a model Earth or something with a perfect atmosphere, people running free. It could be that it's a filthy asteroid rock with some sort of halo-like ring around it. So that's what you kind of flesh out yourself as you roll on these tables and determine whether something's got an atmosphere and the size of it and things like that. Also, gas giants, they just say that there's not a gas giant on a 10 plus on a roll of 2d6, because they're assuming most of these systems will have some sort of gas giant formed within it, just because that's useful for various resources and things. And then you build up your name and travel zones on there. So there's the map again. Now, one thing I will say is that when I rolled my test sample up on this, which was doing the 50-50 chance really of each section of each one of these systems having an active planetary system within it, my sheet really filled up quickly. So there's my sample sheet, and you can just see I'm looking nearly to try and find the gaps where there isn't a system. There's a really heavy block here, and as it started to form and I was rolling the numbers up on this, I was getting an awful lot of quality bases in this sector up on the top right area. So it was starting to feel like this was like a political military main sort of core or hub of the entire subsector in this area. Then things started to get slightly poorer quality out over this area here. We've got this X up here, which means that's the lowest. That actually means there's not even a base. There's not even a star base. So you'd have to sort of jump in there and hope that you could get some fuel from somewhere on your journey, or hop over it. So yeah, just an observation really, and it's going to be interesting to see how it works out now. That then take away my sheet to show you the lovely clean one in the book, and you can see how did they get all that gap in there when they were rolling square hex by hex even to determine 50% chance of there being a system. So I think they went for aesthetics over following their strict rules in the book here, because there's just doesn't seem to be any way that this was built up by just going one hex at a time and rolling. It would have been a lot more messy, I think. But there's nothing wrong with that. This is something they encourage in the book. You don't have to take that 50-50 exactly. You may say, actually, I want a space up on this side. I want it to feel sparse because there's going to be some outer rim locations that the adventuring party in their scout ship or merchant trading are going to need to do a difficult adventure to get there. You've then got technology level, the starports, and this is the one that I'll be doing in this video. Mostly is rolling on what the starports are once I've decided what the quality of the base is there. Then you've got trade goods and various other travel codes and bits and pieces there, which is the red and amber, which I mentioned, which is the red is the no-go. It's been deemed dangerous by the Imperium, and amber is the sort of warning location. Well, red is like forbidden, but amber is warning. They do give you some variations in here, actually, if you're doing a space opera style. So as I said before, really an adventure is fine to sit within one of these subsectors, which is what we're defining here with that 8 by 10 hex grid. but there's nothing to say you couldn't go space opera style and really make it a lot grander with more sectors and big battles raging across multiple subsectors if you so wished. So yeah, as I was saying, I've gone a bit digital on this. You can download these sheets anywhere on the internet, and there's a copy in the back of the book. You could photocopy it if anybody's got a photocopier anymore. But yes, you can download a PDF. You could edit the PDF in a graphics app as well and add sections to it if you like. I just printed out a grid when I did this version, but I've gone digital with this. I'm going to do it in an application called Omnigraffle, which is just like a basic version of Visio, basically, which allows you to do a grid. You could do this if you manage to find yourself a hex shape. You could do this in PowerPoint. You could do this online in the free Google Draw app as well. I was contemplating using Google Draw because it's free, and plus I could share it afterwards. But you know, leave me a note below if you want to grab a copy of this, because I will turn it into a PDF and I'll just share it once I've done the whole couple of videos. So if people wanted to get a closer look at it, they can. But I'll switch over now. So if I just turn off my desktop and then bring up the application Omnigraffle. So, right, so this looks a bit crowded, doesn't it? And I think I just said before when I was showing you the desktop how elegant the one in the book looked compared to my own, which looked rather crowded. But the reason for this, if I zoom into one section individually, the reason for having this so full of information, once I go in and you can see one hex, it's because I'm going to remove the information from here as part of this rolling process. So as I work through this, I'll be removing details when I don't need them. So if I roll for my first hex here, and I roll high enough that there's, or low enough that there's not a system in there on the 50-50 roll, I'll just be going in and literally deleting everything out of that hex because there's no reason to have any of that information in there. So essentially I'm following the law of subtraction here, because I wanted an easy way to edit these elements on here. I just made one with every system and every type of base on it, and then I'm going to just delete them out, like I said, just to make it nice and quick. So I can just go, okay, there's no planet here, there's no bases, I'll just select all those, delete, move on to the next one. Is there a system here? Yes, and then start to flesh it out from there. So right in front of me, I'm going to be using my dice tower, which you can see here, which I'll just roll a couple of dice into. And because it's mostly a 2d6, but to start with, the initial step is just going to be a d6 as I work through. And on a 4 to 6, it means there's a system in place. So I'd come into this one, I'd leave that central sort of planet representation in the middle there because this has got a system. And then I would then work my way over to my table and use that as well. So as an overview running through here in terms of the build, you start with system, you roll a 2d6, and a system means that either is the hex blank or has it actually got a system in there. And it's just a 50-50 chance. So they reckon, I could be flipping a coin, but they reckon 1 to 3 on a dice or 4 to 6 is a fair way of doing it. Then has that system got a gas giant? Now they reversed the logic on this a bit for me in the book, because they said basically 10 to 12 is a no, 2 to 9 is a yes. But when you read this section in the book, it's very unusual. I feel like I should read it out because it is the writing is, well, it's not back to front, but it's just an unusual way of writing. It says gas giants are relatively common. For each system, throw 10 plus on a 2d6 for at least one gas giant not to be present in the system. If one is present, mark the system hex. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the way it reads, but it just, to me, I would just say on a 2 to 9, there's a gas giant. On a 10 plus, there's not. So, yeah, unusual way of reading it back to front. But anyway, that's just how they've written it in the logic. I don't know if that's what it was like in the very original Traveller, because I don't have a copy here, but the 2008 edition, that's how they wrote that round. I'm sure that, unfortunately, is a bit of a train spotter's-like detail, but when I read that, it made me smile. And the other thing that made me smile is this table. Now, this next table is the starport table. And I've kind of taken this out of the main rulebook and just edited it up, because in the book, they have two tables representing first the starport grade, the class here of the starport, running from excellent down to none on an X. But then there's a second table they've got where you'd roll to see what kind of bases are connected to the starport. So you've got naval, scout, research, traveller aid society, imperial consulate, and pirate bases. I just combine those into one table here for my own speed of process. And then I've got a little key down here where I just pulled in some images that I've used to represent the different locations, including starport base, starport class goes on there as well. So this is the starport table, and these are the kind of bases along the top that you can put in there. And again, they're a 2d6 roll too. So essentially, if I'd rolled up a 5 to 6 on 2d6, it's going to be poor. And actually, on a poor quality base, there's only a chance there's a scout based in there on a 7+, and another roll again on a 12+. There'd be a pirate located in there. And I'm interested on the curve here in terms of probability, how they've done this for pirates. I've just selected that column, but for pirates, basically it's very hard on these small ones. Obviously, pirates don't think there's rich enough pickings on a poor or frontier starport to set up any activity. But when you jump up to a routine or good starport, the pirates start sniffing around at the potential nefarious activities they can get up to. But then when you get up to excellent grade, I mean, that's a high class starport, top quality, and they obviously have systems and government controls in place that prevent piracy. So it kind of goes in that kind of loop there. But there's nothing to stop you doing something where you said, actually, this frontier location, I'm going to make it run by pirates. Why not? You needn't even roll if you don't want to. I'm going to roll because I'm just going to let the table, take me where it takes me. So as I said, by way of process, I'm going to be working through these hexes one at a time and then rolling on those tables and deleting out all of the good stuff, or leaving it behind if the case may be where I've rolled it and they've actually got all those systems and star bases and things in there. And you can see I've actually put the numbering system. You have the columns down here, a column 01 down this side, and you can see that it goes down to 010. 0110 down there, and that's the reference for those hexes, and it goes 02, 03, 04. So you can reference those afterwards, and when I get to the second phase of this second part video, I'm going to use those references because it's going to be important when I label out all of the, what atmosphere has it got, what's the government like, what trade goods have they got, and everything along those lines in more detail. So as I work through this, I'll be using a dice tower that I've got in front of me. If I just get that out of the way, put the camera on it, you can see I've got my dice tower in front of me. So I'll be muting some of this, otherwise you're going to have this noise every once in a while. And basically, as I said, I'll put a dice in there. That means there's no system, because a 1 to 3 means there's no system at all in that individual system area. It's just the blank void of space. And 4 to 6, there'll be one in there. And that's the first thing I'm going to be doing, is working through like that. And as I do it, you'll see this slowly form as I carve out these sections on the app I'm using here to do it. So as I said, back over here, 2d6, is there a system? 50-50, yes, no. Is there a gas giant? And then onto this table, and I'm going to do that for each one completely. So I'm not going to work through the whole lot to see if there's a system. I'll work one at a time. So I'm going to get started, and I say you'll start to see this form out. I'm probably going to fast forward this now because you just don't want to see me filling in each section, but you'll get to see it as it comes. We'll do the first few maybe as a slow recording, so you can actually see it happening, but then it will start to fill out, and I'll fast forward through. So here we go. First one. So I've rolled a 3, which means there's not actually a system in there. So what I'll do now is literally get rid of everything. Whoever was here or was going to be there isn't there. So my one is an empty. My one is an empty system. So I've got a 6, finally I've got a system. So then it's, as I said, just to remind myself, the gas giant, it's 10 to 12, no. So I've done an 8, so I've rolled an 8, I've done an 8, I've rolled an 8. So basically, this is our first system. It's got a gas giant. So we've got, what class is this going to be initially? Is it going to be a class A or a 2 or less and nothing? So I'll roll my dice again, see what comes up. Why not let you see this? Why not? Let's get rid of that briefly. So I've got a 6, and a 6 means that it's a D class, which is poor. So I can just highlight that up on the sector and put a D in there. And you just see that going in. So I've just used D in that location. So we can see from a poor, the only ones worth roll with, only ones you can roll for are, is there a scout there? So again, I'll just roll, is there a scout? So 6, so I haven't rolled a 7 plus, there's no scout, and a pirate is 12 plus. So 10, nearly had a pirate, but there's no bases. So it has a star port, but no bases at all. So if I bring that back up again, we can zoom in a little bit to have a look at me just getting rid of things here. So basically, so it's worth me saying something now. Just zoom out just to see, slow down a moment on the recording speed, because I was scooting that through so you can see it. So you can see my system is coming together. Well, my subsector. Already I've got Lindisfarne up at the top here, which has a B class, which is pretty amazing. And I also rolled up on here that it had Navy Scout and the Traveller Aid Society TAS and an Imperial Consulate on there. So it had pretty much the full set. Haven't got any pirates yet, because it's quite hard to roll the 10 plus or 12 plus, depending on the type of system, to get a pirate. A couple of E classes, which E is a frontier. So pretty much low grade, and you can only actually get a scout on there. Then I had a D, which is a poor starport. A poor can have basically, E is the one that you can't get anything on at all. So E, you can only have pirates. D class, you can have a scout, and I happened to roll one there, which I was quite pleased about, getting a scout at least on that poor grade one there. Then I had a nice B class come up again here. Not as many of the bases installed around the starport, but they're there. And then Ozark down here has an A class. I mean, this is a stellar place. But interestingly enough, it's already forming ideas in my head, because they have an Imperial Consulate and a Navy, but they haven't got any other representation here. This could be a very strict system, very potentially law-abiding. Something unusual about the fact that already they've kicked out the scouts. They've got no Traveller Aid Society representation there. And it's also sort of out on a limb at the moment, but we'll see as we work through the rest here. And here we go. Let's do the next section, starting with this classification up here of 0301. Fascinating, this cluster in the bottom left here, which do feel like outliers. We have in this system here We have a scout, 308 far eye gear, and a scout here and a scout here. So it does feel like these are new territory. Class D is a poor starport, so 2 poor starports, one slightly better starport on Nixon here, which is a class C, which is routine. But I couldn't roll anything above. This one doesn't even have a gas giant down here in Sark. But as a cluster, they're feeling interesting game-wise because they are representing a kind of outlying region. So I'm going to go silent again and work my way through the next phase here. Okay, so system here, Oran, which has got that A-class starport, which makes it quite nice in the central here. It's quite well surrounded, even though most of the base is around it. Or there's a B down here on Toxon. It's feeling like a natural subsector hub here on Oran. And then the way this little cluster is currently kind of stuck out here with far eye gear, Nixin, Yanis, and Insark, all looking a bit sort of poor, low grade, really, down in the bottom left area here, with a nice clear break of, at least in this region, of 207, 307, and 0407 there. So I'm going to go dark again now, and when I say dark, I mean quiet, just while I flush out the rest. Okay, let's zoom into the next row. Gone a bit close in there, come back out, it's a bit too in my face. And here we are at the top, and rolling the d6 to see. So I tell you what, that's very pleasing what's happened down here with this whole sector, region of the subsector that I'm creating. Poor quality frontier style around the perimeter here, with this Nixin in the middle being a C class here, and that is just generally very pleasing. So we're here on column 6, starting at the top here on 0601. I ended up with 1 pirate, which is not ideal, but that's better than not having anything on there at all. And because Pirate just didn't roll up. And interestingly enough, on C class, and I think it's B class, a 10 plus gives you a Pirate when you roll to check for a pilot. Every other section it's 12 plus, so it's hard to get it unless you're waiting and doing a dice modifier on the roll. And let me just bring myself back up onto the screen so you can see me chatting away. Yeah, so obviously you've seen the sped up process with a couple of pauses for me where I was putting this together, but general observations are, as expected, there's not a huge amount of the Imperial Consulate, the ICs, because they are rolling up mostly when you're in a higher quality of the starport. You see there's a lot of C class and D class starports, and that's because obviously rolling a 2d6, it's going to come up with a 7 or 8 quite often, in which case you're going to see a lot of that. Arrows. So I'm going to do the jump routes by connecting up the core there, which I'm probably going to make in a kind of light grey colour, but increase it because I want it to be, I don't want it to be too fat. I don't want it to be a dotted line. And if I, yeah, you can see that it's in there, but you can't see it sort of wiping out the gas giant that's in there. And then I can sweep that down as well to here, to Galdox, which is certainly the poor relative of Lindisfarne. So I can also then put one into Fix Iron 5 to Old York. Yeah, I can see them calling this this system Old York just because there's nothing much there apart from a D class and a scout location. And then continue that process down in terms of these jumps. Toxon is acting as that hub here, so it will have the route out to Ozark, but there won't necessarily be one from Talon. Again, it's a D, but Ozark being really quite a high quality location. When you get to put the trade details, trade goods and materials that these places produce, again, you might roll up an agricultural world. You can add other trade connections as well. So the trade routes I will do, when I put them on, I'll probably do some sort of dotted line, presenting a challenge for people over this side, unless they've got, because jump drive 1 only takes you 1 parsec at a time. Jump 2 would be required to get over here, but I'm not going to put any jump routes over to these. There might be a jump route from here, a 2-step jump route from Ozark, connecting these regions, but yeah. And then obviously Gorn Belt does need somehow a 2-step jump to get up to Hollowvern. Maybe that'll be the connection. Ozark will connect to Far Igear, and then Yanas will have some sort of double jump to Gorn, but potentially no trade route this way. Again, presenting a kind of lawlessness around Zokal, Zern X, Heliopan, and on Hollowvern there. Please like and subscribe, and if you're interested in this stuff, please comment, tell me where I went wrong, or give me some new ideas, because my memory of Traveller is very much I played it in the 80s and was involved in jumping around on ships and doing some fun action, but then this was a whole gap for me. I haven't picked up Traveller, even though I've picked this version up from 2008. I haven't played it since the 80s, so there could be some other good stuff I should be thinking about from other versions of Traveller, because very much you can just bolt it all in. So let me know in the comments, and subscribe if you want to see the next version of this, where I go into detail, system by system, hex by hex, to roll on the tables that provide me, as I said, the everything from planetary size to oxygen content, water content, and navy, army, all sorts of other sort of details about the planets. So thanks again for listening in, and goodbye.